Hey everybody, I'm going to do a quick video about interval notation, but in order to explain it, we're going to need to go over number lines and inequalities. Just as a quick reminder, that open circle here is not including that value at -3, and this closed circle is including that value at 7, okay? So anything that I'm shading is including that value on the number line. Anything I'm not shading, again, that's why I dramatically do that open circle, is not including that value, okay? So if I were going to write an inequality to represent that number line, I would work left to right. And again, this left or right concept is going to become important as we're talking about interval notation, okay? So I'm looking left to right. I'm going to say, let's use x to represent it. X is, then my smallest value that I'm starting with here is -3, okay? So x is greater than, I'm not going to say equal to like we just discussed, that open circle doesn't include, okay? So just greater than rather than greater than or equal to, I would do that if I were including -3, but I'm not. And then up to and including 7, okay? So I'm going to say less than or equal to that value at 7, okay? So let's do one more with this. Let's say you were given an inequality. X is greater than 4.3. How would I sketch that on the number line? So I'm going to do my number line, 4.3. Now, some of you, I will often notice, have learned to sketch it above the number line. Maybe people feel like they can see a little bit better. Sorry, let me, sort of like what you see up here. So if I'm going to, again, left to right, x is greater than or equal, so we're starting at that 4.3 but not including it, and then that arrow's indicating 4.3 to infinity, so that keeps going, okay? So how would we do this with interval notation? Let's use that top example, okay? Interval notation is, we are going to use parentheses and brackets for interval notation. Okay, so we're just going to look at a third way to do this. The parentheses, or sorry, the brackets here I'm going to start with. That's going to be inclusive. And the parentheses are going to be not inclusive. And I'll explain what I mean with that in a second. So just like I discussed when I was talking about the number line, we want to look left to right, smallest. So I'm looking, let's start with our interval. If I wanted to write this in interval notation, or sorry, my inequality. If I wanted to write my inequality using interval notation, I'm going to start at -3, okay? Now the question is, am I including that or not? So not inclusive, I would use my parentheses. Inclusive, I'm using my brackets. Since I am not including that, just greater than -3, and also here not including that open circle, I'm going to use my parentheses. And then the general notation, I use a comma here, and I'm going up to 7. And so the question is, am I including 7 or not? We look at our closed circle, we look at our less than or equal to, so that's including. So inclusive, I'm going to use the brackets here, okay? Let's look at another example. If I were given this number line and I said 3.3 and close circle. Okay, so if I want to do interval notation, again, parentheses, brackets, not inclusive, inclusive, sorry, going off the page, but smallest value is 3.3, so I'm going left to right. Am I going to include that? Yes, we've got that closed circle, okay? So if I'm going to include it, I'm going to do brackets, always with the comma, okay? Sorry, so I'm going to do in the light blue here what is like standard notation, small, either your parentheses or your brackets, then that smaller value, a comma, and then we're going to go up to, now there's no stopping point. Notice that's going on infinitely. So this is where we're going to use going on to infinity here. Okay. And we can talk about this more in class, but generally speaking, when you're using infinity, or if we're going in the other direction, negative infinity, we're going to use the parentheses always with that, but we could talk about that in class. Okay, so that's another example. Let's do one more. Okay, so let's say, let's do that. We just did a number line, so let's do it with an inequality. So if I was doing 3.73, so let's say x is greater than or equal to 3.73 and less than or equal to 57, okay? If I wanted that in interval notation, brackets and parentheses, so I'm looking at my smaller value here, 3.73. Am I including that? Yes or no? Yes, I am including x is greater than or equal to, right? The equals to is what we care about here. So greater than or equal to, so I'm going to include it, comma, and then up to 57, and again, greater than or equal to, so I'm going to include it, and then another bracket here, okay? And that's really all we need to start. We're going to talk more about this in the context of a bigger conversation, but I just wanted you all to have at least seen this at some point.